Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. I'm Kamen Entchev with Tom Casselman. We've had a few weeks off, Tom, but we're back for some more awesome sports chatter. So much to get through today when it comes to NBA offseason moves. Jordan Poole is out. Chris Paul in at Golden State. Bradley Beal joining the Suns. Porzingis is a Celtic now. Is Dame Times done in Portland? Where could he land? The Dame Time Master. What about the beard? James Harden. Both guys looking to join new teams. Kyrie Irving staying put with the Mavs. Is that a smart move for Dallas? We also have an NBA in-season tournament coming up. That'll be fun to discuss. A rookie star in the Summer League. Plenty of baseball talk as well. Home Run Derby and All-Star Game wrapping up the last couple days. The National League finally won an All-Star Game. How about that? Vlad Jr. doing like his dad, winning the Home Run Derby just like Vlad Sr. We'll be giving our mid-season awards, AL, NL, MVP, Cy Young. We'll talk about some of the most surprising teams in a good way, some of the most disappointing teams. Of course, our World Series picks at the halfway mark roughly. Tom, it's been close to a month. In the summer, we're taking a little bit of hiatus. I mean, obviously, I'll be talking Wimbledon and soccer, too. Got to get those in. But I'm excited to be back. Looking forward to a fun show. How are you doing on this? I was going to say beautiful Wednesday afternoon here in the Chicagoland area, but it's actually kind of wet and dreary, to be honest, if we're being honest.
Yeah, we were kind of due for one of these duds of a day. I mean, yesterday was absolutely gorgeous, but I'm doing fantastic and certainly excited to be talking about sports now that we've had, this is a little bit of a downtime in the calendar year for sports, but of course, we now have the completion of the NBA draft as well as NBA free agency. It is no longer just a rumor or the pre-free agency negotiations. We now actually have terms on contracts and trades that have gone through, and arguably the biggest one, and there were quite a lot of them, but this one was pretty big and pretty surprising, is that Chris Paul is now going to be a Golden State Warrior after he was part of another shocking trade where Phoenix Sun, in their competitive, gotta win a championship window, ship him over to Washington, D.C. for Bradley Beal. Washington turns around and flips him for Jordan Poole, and a move that makes, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense for both teams as far as that's concerned. I think we'll be focusing more on the Golden State side of things, but really quickly for Washington, I did want to touch on that. This fits their window a little bit better. The late 30s Chris Paul doesn't really do a whole lot to help your team, your franchise, any way beyond just, hey, kids are going to want to buy a Chris Paul jersey. He's going to draw some fans to the seats in that arena in downtown DC. But Jordan Poole fits a bit better because he's a younger player. He's an exciting scorer, and he's getting his wish. We'll see how much he actually appreciates, hey, I deserve a bigger role, which is kind of some of the noise in the background about Steve Kerr saying, yeah, I'm okay if we let Jordan Poole go. Of course, there was the Draymond Green dust-up where Poole said something or another to Draymond Green, and
Multiple
Draymond
things,
responded.
apparently.
Responded in a way that Draymond wants to respond. And so that certainly was a thing. But then, Steve Kerr saying, you know what, this guy, he's not getting with the program. He's not understanding that he is the fourth banana at best. Send him off to DC. He can go play hero ball all he wants. Not really going to do all that much winning, but already has a ring. Maybe he's not all that interested in it. But let's move now to the Golden State side of things. Chris Paul trade, and then, of course, re-signing Draymond Green. How do you rate these moves for Golden State? As I know your fandom of that team grows even bigger.
Yeah.
I know you love Steph. You also love Chris Paul. Is this a move where Chris Paul can eventually get a ring, perhaps?
So first off, Jordan Poole is one of the most overrated athletes in the world as we speak. So this is a great move for the Warriors. Tom, what do the Warriors do? They shoot threes efficiently. Talk about hero ball. Jordan Poole forgot he's Jordan Poole. He's not Steph Curry. He's not Klay Thompson. Last year, Jordan Poole shot 43% from the field and 33.6% from three. For his career, 42% from the field, 33.9% from three. So we're talking, 42, 43%, 33 to 34 from three. This man is actually not a good shooter. I think just the volume amount of shots he takes, he's going to make some. There's no reason why shooting those percentages, he should be averaging 20 points per game on the Warriors team. I mean, he should be giving more shots to Steph and Clay. And if you've actually read into this, Klay Thompson had a lot of issues with Jordan Poole, not just Draymond Green. Even Steph Curry reportedly had issues with Jordan Poole. So this is a chemistry thing. And look, I know CP3 is on the tail end of his career. Can Jordan Poole consistently put up numbers? I don't know about the Washington side of things. To be honest with you, it doesn't really matter because Washington wasn't going to be a contender with Chris Paul. They're not going to be a contender with Jordan Poole. But for the Golden State fit, for what they do, 100% is a good move. I mean, Chris Paul shot 38.3% from three last year. I'm not saying he's all-star level Chris Paul, but 14 points, 9 assists, that's pretty solid last season. What does that team thrive off of? Ball movement. I mean, obviously Chris Paul, we know him as a guy that maybe isn't as quick on the pace. That's my one concern. Is he going to slow down the Golden State pace? But as far as passing the ball, shooting the ball, Chris Paul has all that. They're not asking him to be, the superstar. He's the third, fourth, maybe fifth banana on that team. I think he knows that. So I think it's a good fit. And honestly, again, I don't know about long term now. 2-3 years from now, Chris Paul, maybe he's even older. Maybe Jordan Poole improves. But at the moment, I actually still think CP3 is a better basketball player than Jordan Poole. I really do. I think he fits in better there. So I think it's a good move for Golden State. With that said, I'm not saying this move is like massive. I mean, they didn't get way better. Is this move going to put them over the top? I mean, this team already won a championship 2 years ago. A lot of it is going to go down to what Clay are we going to see? Is Steph going to be still the Steph he was? What's going to happen with Andrew Wiggins? Because the biggest issue, I guess there was many issues, and Jordan Poole was a big part of it. But Andrew Wiggins staying healthy is a big issue for them. How are they going to get him incorporated into that lineup? So I think they have a 2 or 3 year window. You look at Steph, you look at Clay, you look at Draymond. This team is not going to be contending for rings in 5-6 years down the road. Chris Paul, albeit past his prime, he's probably got about a 2 year window. So this is a win now move. I think it's more about getting rid of Jordan Poole, though, than adding Chris Paul, which sounds crazy to think about because Chris Paul is one of the all-time great basketball players. But clearly there was issues in Golden State. And from what I've read about it, it seems like Jordan Poole was the problem. I mean, look, I'm not a Draymond guy personally. I don't love his antics, but it does seem like the Warriors like Draymond Green. And it's not so much that Draymond Green throwing the punch that did the chemistry. Maybe it was just Jordan Poole talking. So good move for Golden State. Very well I'll be cheering for them. I'm not ready to say they're the favorites, but I think they're among the top five favorites. They're up there. This injuries, stuff like that makes a big difference. They certainly can win a championship. I just want to see because Chris Paul is going to take a little bit pressure off Steph, bring the ball up. Are they going to start them together or is CP3 going to come off the bench? That's the interesting thing. I know a reporter asked him that, and he's like, I'm not sure yet. Who's saying I'm coming off the bench? So that'll be interesting there. But I think they'll find a way to make it work because CP3 is a pass-first player, and he'll make it work there.
Yeah, and what we've kind of seen out of the Golden State Warriors is I know that they've won a couple of championships with this core of Steph, Clay, and Draymond.
More than a couple.
So the way where I'm going with this is that they also had Kevin Durant come in.
Durant. Okay. Yeah.
And with Durant coming in, we saw a different level of Golden State. Naturally, because Kevin Durant is an amazing basketball player, one of the greatest to ever to play the game. But what we saw kind of take place was a diversification of the Golden State Warriors offense, because with Kevin Durant on the team, you now could give Steph a little bit of a break. You could give Clay a little bit of a break and say, okay, instead of doing this motion offense that we typically do, we can just give it to Kevin Durant. He can go isolation and he can get a bucket from just about anywhere on the floor, which
Mhm.
isn't insignificant when it comes to giving Steph a break on offense. And I think it was Mina Kimes who was talking about this and referencing this and kind of pointed in this direction, something that Golden State doesn't really do a whole lot of. I think they were like the fourth least. They used pick and roll, the fourth least amount in the NBA. And what is Chris Paul known for? Pick and roll offense. In fact, he was in the 89th percentile in the NBA for points on pick and roll plays. So what this does is that it provides another option, another break for Golden State, that you don't have to run Steph Curry and have him be both the point guard and also a top shooter. Chris Paul now allows Steph Curry to be, dare I say, the best catch and shoot 3-point guy in the NBA. It just allows Steph to take a little bit different role and is really going to be a big headache for opposing coaches. And it's not going to take over, of course, the entirety of what Golden State does on offense, but it does give a little bit of diversification, which you need at this stage of Steph's career. I mean, we saw in the playoffs, nobody could stop Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray with their pick and roll, their pick and pop. But part of that is because those guys are in their 20s. And we saw Steph and Clay and Draymond when they were in their 20s. They didn't need diversification because they were at the peak of their athletic ability, peak of their conditioning. Now that they're on the downside of that, now that they're on the quote wrong side of 30, having this sort of diversity is going to be really, really important for Golden State, even if it is just for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, just little spurts and stretches of the game. I think that's really significant in bringing Chris Paul and why I think it's a good move. Another thing it does is, and I'm not going to necessarily call it a failure per se, but we definitely had this notion of there are two different tracks in Golden State where they had their core of Steph, Clay, bringing in, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green. They had our win now championship core. And then they had guys like Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Jonathan Wiseman. And they were trying to do two things where it's let's build this dynastic powerhouse where we have the old guard, the established guys, and then these younger guys kind of coming along, developing, and eventually will replace. We saw a lot of those guys weren't really developing, not having a ton of playing time and not having a really big role on either end of the floor. So what we're seeing Golden State do is say, you know what? We're going to go all in on a win now timeline. We're going to pay the price for it later. Eventually, Steph is going to retire. Draymond's going to retire. They're not going to have a ton of draft picks. They're going to have all these different cap issues. Eventually, it's going to get to a point where it doesn't work. That happens for every team, every dynasty, every sport ever. Golden State felt like they were trying to, cheat code that a little bit. It didn't quite work. So now they're saying, we're going to go all in for the next, like you said, 2-3 years, however long that window is. Win now, optimize for now, and I think that's a pretty good move on Golden State's part to get everything on one consolidated timeline.
Just a couple quick points. One, I'd argue whatever Golden State is doing did work because they won the championship just 2 years ago. So I know it was a mix of both of those things, but I would say what they've done has worked because Durant worked. They won 2 championships, but they won 2 championships without Durant. The other thing is, I do agree with you 100% about diversifying the offense, making things a little bit different, a little bit less predictable. I think Draymond and Clay are more on that wrong side of 30. I know Steph is older, but my goodness, if you watched him in the NBA Finals 2 years ago, if you watched him in the playoffs against the Kings, I know he didn't have the best series against the Lakers, but this man just dropped 50 points in a playoff game just a couple months ago. Actually, he was just looking at NBA player rankings, and we've had this discussion ad nauseum. The top 7 or 8 players are all pretty close, but this list was listing off the best players in the NBA for this next season. That Steph Curry is the number 2 player in the NBA behind Jokic, ahead of Giannis, ahead of Durant. So if you look at what he's doing, I don't really think he's past it. He's going to get there eventually, but Curry's game has never really, not to say that, obviously he's an NBA athlete, he's athletic, but that's not the main focal point of his game. He's not super, tall. He doesn't jump super high. He's not super strong. He's just average foot speed, for an NBA point guard, shooting guard. He thrives off of shooting ability, dribbling ability, finishing, off the ball movement, smarts, intelligence, skills. I think Steph Curry is, I don't want to say he's like quite at where he was in his prime, but he's like right there. I mean, we're talking
Mhm.
like prime Curry and Curry now. It's like right there. It's kind of like, he's not at the same level as Michael Jordan. I'm not going to say that he is Michael Jordan, so don't take this the wrong way. But you had your late 80s, early 90s Jordan, who was probably a little bit better than the late 90s Jordan, but they were both like right there. And he was not necessarily so much better or worse, just a little bit different. I think Steph Curry is kind of like that, because I think he's very close to who he was. You watch him play, nothing has really changed. So I think he's got plenty left over. Speaking of, draft picks going for it now, the Suns, Tom, definitely going for it now. That's for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, Matt Ishbia, the new owner of the Phoenix Suns, has wasted no time in playing with his brand new shiny toy,
Right.
doing a number of things, bringing in Kevin Durant, bringing in now Bradley Beal. So, yeah, like you said, certainly a win now move. And we kind of had this discussion with Kevin Durant last year when they brought him in at the trade deadline. Does this make Phoenix the top primo contender? I think we had the consensus of not quite, but it certainly moves them up in that conversation. Does this move now put them over the top, bringing in Bradley Beal? I don't think they have a single draft pick for the next like 7 years or whatever it is.
Yeah,
There
they just
is
worked out a couple deals to get a couple second
a
round
couple of
picks.
second rounders. Okay, so
They have
that's
almost no draft picks.
So does
So
this make them, kind of like top three title contender? I mean, does this make them the favorite out of the Western Conference now? Or do you think that this is going to be the latest iteration of a super team that is doomed to fail?
this could go either way. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think there's a heavy favorite right now in either conference. I mean, if we have to pick one favorite, it's got to be the Nuggets, defending champions. Whole core is back. But I mean, I look at the Nuggets, I look at the Lakers, the Warriors, the Suns. I look at out east, the Bucks, the Celtics, and I mean, I think the favorite for me is going to be the Heat if they can get Dame time. But we'll talk
Hmm.
about that later on. But I don't think there's one team that you look at, that team is so far ahead of everyone else. Because I think it's a pretty wide open field. A lot of these teams are close. So I'm not going to say they're the one favorite. I still think it's got to be Denver with what they did. Are they a top three favorite? Man, they're right there. But I don't know. I still think it's a little bit of the case of too many basketballs. I mean, you look at Durant, you look at Booker, you look at Bradley Beal. They're basically the same type of player. They're a perimeter player.
Hmm.
Neither one, not to say that they can't pass the ball, they can, but they're not necessarily like a facilitate and set up your teammates, make
Yes.
your teammates better. They're more of that ISO ball, and you essentially have three ISO ball players on the same team. Bradley Beal obviously coming off some injuries. We'll see just how good he is. I think he's not a great 3-point shooter. He's not bad. He's serviceable, but he was about 35% last year. So, I mean, he's the third option. If teams leave him open, is he an automatic from three? Not really. And yes, they just added one more superstar. But what was the problem last year? Durant and Booker were putting up 30, 40 points every game against the Nuggets. They couldn't win the series because no one else was doing a thing. So I can't call it a bad move, because I look at like what's out there, like who can they really add that would really put them over the top. I mean, like
Hmm.
Damian Lillard is better than Bradley Beal, but again, same type of player again. So I don't know what they could do for that fit. I think in many ways they could probably go the opposite way, get a bunch of good role players, but that's not easy to do with all the money they're paying these guys. So I'm a little bit torn.
Hmm.
I think their odds did improve. It's kind of like the CP3 move. I think overall it's a good move, but it's not a move that necessarily like absolutely moves the needle. I'm not ready to say like this is the missing piece, Bradley Beal. It's the same
Hmm.
type of player, Tom.
Yeah.
We have three ISO players. It's going to be like you take your turn, and is Bradley Beal going to become the next, Kevin Love, the next Chris Bosh, like that third guy? And like it worked for Chris Bosh, but like Kevin Love, we saw how like his career, like on a individual level, his career
Hmm.
really went downhill when he had to become the third option. He was not used to that. For him, it didn't work. I know they did win that one championship, but that wasn't because of Kevin Love. It was because of
No.
LeBron and Kyrie.
Yeah, they absolutely
So,
lost their minds, putting up like 40 a
yeah,
game toward the end. Yeah.
exactly. So I don't know. I lean towards it happened. I know it seems like a big move, but I'm just not ready to say, "Oh my god, Bradley Beal's on the Suns. Game over. Look out NBA. This is the greatest triple team ever." So I'm kind of like, "Meh," you know. That's my thought on this.
That's where I fall. It's a cross between meh and you could have done better, quite frankly. I mean, they gave up hardly anything to get Bradley Beal from the Washington Wizards. I mean, it's Chris Paul, Andrew Shamet, and like pick swaps or something along those lines. It's not. I mean, Washington is going to be worse off than Phoenix most of those seasons anyway, so they're not even going to be cashing in on the pick swaps. This was pretty much Washington saying, yeah, we gave the supermax to Bradley Beal, and then we gave him something that no other player in the NBA has, which is a no trade clause in his contract, basically meaning that Bradley Beal got to dictate where he was going to play. It was up to Washington to make it happen at that point, and they just wanted to be done with him. I find it interesting that, what's kind of been the knock on Chris Paul over the past couple of years as far as why he hasn't been part of the reason that Phoenix is elevated to win a championship. It's been his age, his availability, his injury history, and they're going to trade for a guy who missed 74 games over the past two seasons. Not
Mm,
really the model of availability right there,
yep.
which some could say is the most important ability that a player can have.
Even
Uh,
Durant, Tom, as great as
Even
Durant
Durant's
is,
missed
same
sometimes. Yeah,
problem. Same
absolutely.
problem.
So it's exactly like you said. It's too much of the same guy doing the same thing, and I think that, I mean, there's no way to say that this deal would happen if we had waited a little bit later for, say, James Harden to opt into his contract. I think a player like James Harden would fit in much, much better because he is a proven facilitator. He is a
Mhm.
guy who's proven that he can. He's not a great catch and shoot guy. Like, he's not going to knock down three pointers at the same clip that a lot of other players will on catch and shoot. Off the dribble, he's much better because that's been his game for so long. But at the very least, he is a better and more willing facilitator than Devin Booker, than Kevin Durant, guys who can do the job, can get the job done, but they're not point guards in the true sense that you kind of want to have when it comes to the postseason,
They
quite
don't have a
frankly.
point
So
guard, just to be clear. They don't
yeah,
have one.
it's going to be a combination of Devin Booker. It's mostly going to be Devin Booker, I think, bringing the ball up, but he's not a true point guard. That's not really his game, and I hope that doesn't detract from his other ability, his superpower, which is scoring. That's what he's really, really good at doing. Um, I mean, his 3-point percentage isn't much better than Bradley Beal. I think he was at like 35.5% or something like that from three this past season. So it's going to be interesting to see how and if this works out. It might be one of those things where just on sheer talent alone, I mean, you're always going to have one of the three guys of Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant on the floor going up against opposing teams' second units. It's just going to be a matter of, does a superstar or two, and then however many guys you can fill out on the vet minimum, is that going to be enough to go up against some teams that are going to have a little bit more of a developed, well rounded bench that actually plays as a cohesive unit as opposed to just a smattering of talent? So for me, looking at the Western Conference, I think this does honestly put the Phoenix Suns in the top three. But to be fair, I thought that they were kind of already there prior to making this move. If we go
Yep.
back to, it's Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Ayton, I kind of already had them penciled in there, giving them a full season to gel, to work together,
They pushed the
to
Nuggets more than any other team in the playoffs, just to be clear.
exactly. And the Nuggets lost a key player in Bruce Brown going over to the Indiana Pacers on an absolutely bonkers deal. But hey, great for him and his family going generations into the future. Kudos for that. But Denver didn't really have a great way of being able to replace Bruce Brown. So while they're good, they're not like peak Golden State Warriors. I'm going to pencil them in as the number one favorite. I mean, Denver's in the conversation, but so's everybody else. The fact that they
Agreed.
won the title last year for me doesn't make them the overly prohibitive favorite. So
No, there's not a clear club favorite.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
this is much ado about very little in the Western Conference. Phoenix remains in the top three, just a little bit different way. It's trading two fives for a 10. We'll see if that works out. I don't
Yeah.
know if it will. I don't have a ton of confidence that it will, but certainly it's going to be some entertaining fare throughout the regular season. And we've talked a ton now about the Western Conference. Let's go to the Eastern Conference, one of the top contenders out there, with the Boston Celtics making a bit of an interesting move. Send out Marcus Smart. He is going now to the Memphis Grizzlies. They bring in Kristaps Porzingis from the Washington Wizards as that team continues their tear down, rebuild. I don't even necessarily know what you want to call it, but is swapping out Marcus Smart, once removed Defensive Player of the Year, for 7'3" Kristaps Porzingis. Is that going to be what pushes Boston over the top, or do you feel pretty much they're in the same boat that they were prior to this move?
Um, it's kind of funny because I feel the same way about this move as the other two, but I'll
Hmm.
say it's a little bit better than the other two because I do think Boston, we know they don't have a big guy on that team that scores. Porzingis is kind of a big guy. I know he's on the perimeter a lot, but I mean, he put up numbers last year. He put up
Hmm.
23.2 points per game, 8 to 9 rebounds a game, 38.5% from three. They're a big 3-point shooting team. That doesn't change with him. I say it's a positive move. You look at Marcus Smart. I talk about Jordan Poole being overrated. Marcus Smart is overrated too. I know he's a great defensive player, but he shot 41.5% last year, 33.6% from three. In that Heat series, even in that Sixers series, they were more than content to let him take open threes. So I think Porzingis to me is probably a better player than Marcus Smart. I do think they didn't really solve the core issue is that they don't have a point guard either. That's
Hmm.
the problem.
Yes.
Speaking of James Harden, Chris Paul, Boston doesn't have a point guard. Marcus Smart was not a point guard. He was a shooting guard playing point guard. I mean, he wasn't like terrible. I think he was just okay as a point guard. But I mean, Boston is what? Arguably a top 5 team in the NBA. They had nowhere near a top 5 point guard in the NBA. So it's kind of like it helps, but it doesn't address the issue. I think, I mean, you know me, I'm not the biggest guy on Boston
Hmm.
personally. I haven't had him winning the championship the last few years. I think I still struggle with Tatum and Brown. I think they're a little bit overrated. I know how much I love statistics, but I mean, like for example, in Brown's case, he's not a big assist guy. Doesn't really help facilitate. Tatum, up and down. He's very streaky. He can be very good at times, but when he's really had to, you know, do it in the big moments, he hasn't. He wasn't great in the NBA Finals against the Warriors. He wasn't great against the Heat. I think we all have that one guy in sports that we
Hmm.
think is not as good as the numbers and maybe other people think. And for me, it's Jason Tatum. So I think this improves Boston, but I'm not ready to say they're the favorite in the East. A lot of this goes down to what happens with Damian Lillard, which, by the way, Jason Tatum has tried to recruit Damian Lillard.
Hmm.
He is a point guard, but he's a scoring point guard. But I think he would be. I mean, that's what would put him over the top. I think
Yes.
Damian Lillard goes to Boston. I'm ready to say yes, they are the finals favorites. Although I think if Damian Lillard goes to Miami, they're the favorites because and we'll talk about this in the next segment. I don't want to go too much into this, but I think at the current moment, I am still going to pick the Milwaukee Bucks as the favorite in the East. I
Hmm.
mean, let's not forget they had the best record in the NBA last year. They did win the championship a couple years ago. I guess it was 3 years ago now. But you look at 2 years ago, I know it sounds like excuses, but they probably would have beaten Boston in the Eastern Conference 7-game series. A lot of those games, coming down to the wire. Chris Middleton, a healthy Middleton, might have made the difference. They did re sign Middleton. Milwaukee did. And also, Giannis was hurt against the Heat. I know it was 1 game or 2 games. I know he was
Hmm.
healthy enough of those games, but to be honest with you, how healthy was he? It's hard to know. Middleton was coming off an injury, and we know playoff Jimmy Butler, but as good as Jimmy Butler is, and as good as he's been in the playoffs, that was his best series ever, like by far, like scoring 40, 50 points. I think they just ran into a buzzsaw Miami team, and it was just bad timing with injuries. The Heat playing the best they can. I got to say, at the moment for me, the Milwaukee Bucks have to be the favorites. I know it sounds weird after a first round exit, but they have what they're the last team out of the East to win the NBA Finals. They were the number 1 seed in the East last year. They have the best player in the East in Giannis. I mean, all due respect to Embiid, I think Giannis is better. So I'm not ready to say Boston's the favorite with this Porzingis move, but I do think that it helps more than it hurts. They did lose Grant Williams as well, which is another role player that kind of hurts
Hmm.
them. So kind of similar to the other moves. And, a lot of this stuff is hard to predict. Fit, how's it going to work out? Who's going to do what? It's not obvious. But on the surface, like all these moves, I don't want to say seem big, like they're big moves, but they're all like not massive improvements for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that this is an okay move for the Boston Celtics. I mean, they're certainly dealing from a position of depth and a position of strength because you look at their backcourt, they still have Malcolm Brogdon, they still have Derek White, they still have some pieces there that can continue to play in the backcourt. Whereas in the front court, it was Al Horford, who's getting up there in years, Robert Williams the third, and then you're rolling with what, Blake Griffin, Luke Cornett. So this at least adds a little bit of depth to your front court while keeping some versatility in your backcourt. I mean, you still have Peyton Pritchard, who was pretty instrumental to getting the Celtics to the NBA Finals as
They
a
didn't play him last year.
as a decent role player. Well, no, they didn't because they had as many pieces. They went out and acquired Malcolm Brogdon. And part of the issue with the Celtics was just, like you said, they don't have a true point guard. And Marcus Smart, size wise, plays point guard. Defensively, he's really, really important, but not really great with that assist to turnover ratio and making too many key mistakes. And Jaylen Brown turning the ball over as often as he did because that's not his game. You're kind of putting a really oversized load on Jason Tatum at that point to be all things to all people on that team. I think trying to get a legit point guard. I know Derek
Yep.
White and Malcolm Brogdon can fill the role, but I don't know necessarily to a championship starting point guard level. But bringing Kristaps Porzingis, I mean, we've seen him try to fit in as part of like a bigger tandem or a bigger presence. Like we saw him with Luka Doncic, and that just did not really work out in Dallas. And I'm kind of cautious or wary of guys that flourish when they're playing on a bad basketball team because it's kind of one of those things where it's, well, who else is going to be putting up points? I mean, yeah, a 7'3" guy who can hit it from outside. He's going to get plenty of run in Washington D.C. because there are no stakes. And does he actually help you against Giannis? Does he actually help you against Embiid? Does he actually help you against Jokic on a defensive perspective? He's got the size for
He's
it, and
blocked some shots.
he's got the size and the length to block shots, but I don't know if that necessarily qualifies him as a good defender. If he can be kind of manipulated, because that is the thing that he does particularly well. It'll be interesting to see how that works out throughout the season, and if he doesn't become kind of a ball stopper in the offensive rotations and everything. I do think that this is similar to the Suns. I mean, the Celtics were a top 3 contender in the East, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As far as the end of the season, right there with Milwaukee. And then, debate if you want to have Philadelphia or Miami. I mean, I think on paper, on talent, I'd put Philadelphia, but certainly Miami and the way that they play, they definitely deserve to be in that conversation, kind of fringing up on that third spot. So Celtics, I think, an okay, solid move. I don't think it is a cure to all of their ills, but we'll see if it's a step in the right direction. At the very least, it improves them on the offensive end. We'll see if that kind of counterbalances losing Marcus Smart on the defensive side of things. If Boston is still going to be able to have success, and you and I both have kind of hinted about this, so let's just dive right into Damian Lillard right
Yeah.
now because talking about, hey, they need a point guard, they're a point guard away, and the next topic is, where is Damian Lillard's best opportunity to win a title next season? It's certainly not going to be Portland, as he is requested out of there, and for good reason. I don't understand why they offered Jeremy Grant the 5-year, $160 million contract that they did. But Miami has been listed as his preferred destination, of course, for the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, Dame does not have a no trade clause in his contract, so the Trailblazers say, "Hey, we got to do what's best for us." And looking at what Miami has, I mean, what are you going to offer up? Tyler Hero and a bunch of late round pick, like that's not terribly appealing when you're trying to trade off the face of your franchise, a guy who's played at an otherworldly level, a guy who's won you series in the Western Conference in the past. You got to get best value possible, and to me, that's why I think that the best spot for Damian Lillard to land is going to be Boston. I mean, if he's able to get to Miami, that's certainly going to be a good one. I think Boston actually is his best chance, though, because Boston has a bunch of draft picks that they can offer up to the Portland Trail Blazers. The Boston Celtics have their own picks. Hang on, let me pull it up here really quickly. They have their own first rounder in 24, 25, 26, 27, 29. That means that they have a lot of flexibility in offering that to Portland, and then they can offer pick swaps or something if they want to, and they can try to structure things in a way that they can add Damian Lillard without having to offload Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis. Which is to say that puts together,
Maybe.
which maybe,
I
but
don't
if
know.
you're
I feel
looking,
like Tatum, or not Tatum, Brown would be the casualty, maybe.
Brown would be the casualty if the Portland Trail Blazers wanted to go that route. But if they wanted to go more of, hey, give us picks, that's the thing that we're looking for deep into the future. At least Boston has the flexibility to make a package around that sort of thing. That Boston could actually have, again, it'd be a really really super top heavy type of team, but you really only need 7 or 8 guys for a deep playoff run. We saw the Denver Nuggets get by with that to win a championship this past year. So I think if he's able to land in Boston, provided Jaylen Brown's not heading out, or even if Jaylen Brown is heading out, that's still a really, really good spot. Miami, of course, is a good one. And then as far as another realistic option, how about Philadelphia? I mean, James Harden signed or opted into his contract, but I think he wants to be moved out as well. That could be something where you can use James Harden if you're Philadelphia to send him to another team to get them to give up some more assets to go back to Portland and kind of use that as a way to facilitate around things and get the players that you need. So I think those are my 3 top picks. I think East Conference is the best chance for Damian Lillard because I don't necessarily see a ton of fits out west, and I don't see the Portland Trailblazers wanting to move Damian Lillard anywhere in the
No.
West.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Those are the 3 that I had written down. I mean, I think there's 2 ways to tackle this.
Hmm.
What's the best fit for Damian Lillard versus
Hmm.
what's the best fit for Portland? I mean, their front office has said that this could take months. They've said that they want to get the right pieces. So this is very tricky. I'm looking at this more of like, what's the best place for him? And I think it's Miami. I
Sure.
think he realizes it. Obviously, basketball aside, the tax-free environment, it's probably the best city for an NBA basketball player to live when compared to Boston and Philadelphia. But I really do think that Miami would work well because a lot of it with superstars is fit. And you put Damian Lillard and Jason Tatum together, or Damian Lillard and Joel Embiid, who's the leading scorer? It's not
Mm,
obvious. It really isn't. Like, is someone going to get in each other's way? Is that guy going to be willing to accept? I mean, I generally don't know who would be the number one scorer. I really don't. I don't really see Embiid willing to give up that title. Tatum, maybe. I mean, who is a better scorer? I don't know. So that worries me a little bit.
sure.
I think fit matters. I think Jimmy Butler has been a number two option in the past. I think Jimmy Butler, is a great defensive player. He's a great leader. He's a good slasher. He's a good mid-range shooter, good free throws. Not a great three-point shooter.
Hmm.
His offense is a little bit inconsistent because he's not a consistent enough shooter. And he's had a lot of pressure there in Miami. I think Jimmy Butler will say, look, Dame, you be, at least on the offensive end. And it's a debate. We know Butler's a better defender or whatever, but at least on the offensive end, you be Batman, I'll be Robin. And that almost fits better as opposed
Hmm.
to we have two Batmans in Boston, two Batmans in Philadelphia. And again, you talk about availability. I mean, Joel Embiid, let's be honest, injuries, a lot of
Hmm.
injuries. Look, on paper, we can say Embiid is what? Probably a little bit better player than Tatum, probably a little bit better player than Jimmy Butler, but is he available enough? I mean, seriously, deep in the playoffs, it seems like every year he gets hurt. Philadelphia, it's the same old story. They've had the talent, trust the process, they never deliver. As for
Hmm.
Boston and Miami, similar situation. Boston's got the talent. They just lost to Miami, Tom Casselman. I think culture is very important. The Heat culture. They have Eric Spoelstra as the coach. They play great defense. Literally, if you watch the NBA Finals, consistent scoring is all this team was missing. Damian Lillard, what does he do best? Consistently score the basketball. So I think for him, Miami's the best fit. I would love to see him on Miami. That could put Miami over the top. I don't know in Boston because it's tricky. Like, if they
Hmm.
let Tatum go, are they good enough then? Maybe. If they don't let Tatum go, is it too many basketballs again? Is it the same problem? I
Do
just
you mean
think
Tatum or Jalen Brown?
Jalen Brown. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
Jalen Brown is what I mean. They wouldn't
Yeah.
let Tatum go. Jalen Brown.
No.
But if they keep Jalen Brown, then is it too many basketballs? Because Jalen
Hmm.
Brown's a very good scorer. Like, he's not a really assist guy. That's not part of his game. But as far as scoring, he's very good. Porzingis is a good scorer. Then that would have what, four guys who all average over 20 a game. I don't know how that's going to fit. So I think Miami is definitely the ideal landing spot for Damian Lillard. It's kind of tricky for Portland's position because, let's be honest, Tom, how often does the team trading the star actually get a good enough deal? Very rarely. So
Hmm.
at what stage does Portland say, like, let's get the very, very best deal possible? Or are we going to be respectful for Damian Lillard, what he's done for us? Are we going to let him go to wherever he wants to go? Because I don't see, no matter what Portland does, no matter who they get, even if they get Jalen Brown and they get Scoot Henderson, there's some excitement about him, but
Hmm.
they're not a contender. Like, they're in rebuild mode. No matter what move they do, there is nobody they can get for James Harden, Damian Lillard, that could make him a contender. James Harden maybe would be the best option, like you said, but even that, they're not a contender. So that's kind of the tricky part of what does Portland do to manage this deal. I'm hoping that Dame Time goes to Miami personally.
Think it'd be fun for him to end up in Chicago, but somehow I don't think that's going to
Ooh,
happen.
baby. That'd be
That'd be a
nice.
ton of fun.
That
So
would be
yeah, that's
nice.
that'll be a lot of intrigue. One last, or no, actually, we got two more NBA items. So
Yeah.
we've got James Harden picking up his option to stay in Philadelphia. Kind of interesting, given the amount of money that was being tossed around on the free agent market. That he decided, nah, I'm going to take this guarantee. It was like 33 and a half. It was a significant sum of money to be sure, but the fact that he didn't feel like he was going to get something perhaps for a few more years, a little bit more guaranteed money out in the market tells me that James Harden might be kind of realizing at this point of his career he is not the dynamic player that he once was, at least not on a consistent enough level. So do we think that he's going to play out the rest of the season in Philadelphia? Do we think that some sort of trade or deal is going to be worked out? What's going to be best for both teams? Because we mentioned back in the Boston Celtics a conversation that Philadelphia is probably that third team, but if you subtract James Harden and not replace him with enough pieces, Philly, I think, easily falls from third behind Miami as that top three team.
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting situation because, I mean, he opted into his contract, but that's because the Sixers wouldn't give him a long term deal. So that's part of the reason. So James Harden, when he wanted to leave the Rockets, it caused a lot of chaos, issues on and off the field, the court, I guess, technically. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. I really don't because there seems to just be something's just not right with Philadelphia. I agree with you. James Harden maybe isn't consistent enough, but he still put up 21 points last year, led the NBA in assists, shot a pretty decent percentages, which are not far off his career averages. I think for him, part of it is the fit. Like, it seems weird because on the surface, it looks like he's okay with letting Embiid be the guy. But then if you listen to some of the stuff that's been said, he wasn't as much okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
James Harden, a lot of it is puzzling is the postseason performances. But he's had some good ones, some not so good ones. Um, I can see why Philadelphia wouldn't give him a long-term deal. I can see why another team wouldn't do it either. But I also wouldn't be super upset if they did because I think there's guys getting long-term deals that are lesser than James Harden. I think this kind of makes sense for both teams. I think they will trade him. But I can also see like, look, why not give it one more run? Prove yourself. Maybe you get the contract the following season. I know the Clippers is where he wants to go. But again, you know how I feel about the Clippers. Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden. I mean, that would be a good fit. He'd be the facilitator there. But then again, Westbrook's coming back there on a very, very
Mm-hmm.
cheap deal. He's going from like 40 million to 4 million. And is that too many basketballs there? I don't know. Too many inefficient players in, Paul George, Westbrook, Harden sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm a little torn here. I think James Harden is better than a lot of teams are giving him credit for. I mean, look, you got 21 and 10 or 11, whatever he averaged. Those are really good numbers, but for him, the question has always been, can he do it in the playoffs? And he hasn't really done it. So it does seem like he's not going to stay in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That seems to be the case. I think he's going to be gone. I don't know where a landing spot is for him to be a championship contender. Again, I don't know if Philadelphia is going to want to trade in the Eastern Conference. And same deal out west. Like, what are the options really? So this is kind of one of those like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what should happen. I don't know what I want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I do think James Harden has a couple more years left. I don't know if he has 4 or 5 years. That's where the struggle is. But if you're going to take a 1-year trade, win now mentality, he can help your team. And I think the best one that you mentioned would be, I don't know, where could he go that he can win a ring, though? I just don't think the Clippers are the answer. So I don't know what's best for him. I mean, maybe Portland, where then he would become the guy. Maybe that's what he wants. I don't know. But I don't really see a fit necessarily for him. And I don't see who
Mm-hmm.
the Sixers can get in return that makes them good enough. I mean, I don't. This is kind of like where both sides are kind of stuck, which
Yeah,
is
this is
weird.
where if Dame Lillard were comfortable with going to Philadelphia, I think the thing that makes the most sense is you send James Harden to Philadelphia or to Miami. You send a couple of other things back to Portland. Miami sends Tyler Hero and some things back to Portland, and then Damian Lillard to Philadelphia. Like that to me makes the most sense as far as kind of fitting together what everybody needs, because Miami needs a bona fide scorer to go along with Jimmy Butler, especially since guys like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus moved on to other teams. So Miami's going to develop some guys behind them, we're presuming, but they could also use somebody on the front line, a bona fide starter there. So maybe Miami isn't able to get the wish of, that top shelf A1 superstar in Dame Lillard, but they got to go a peg or two down to get James Harden, cost them a little bit less. Philadelphia
Does that mess with chemistry though? And is Harden still like, because I look at Harden and Butler, and I'm a James Harden fan personally, like of his game, of who he is. But I think if you want to win a championship, those are both guys ideally who are your number two guy. Like I think you have like two number twos and no number one. And does it mess with the culture? I don't know. I don't know, man.
Yeah, the whole James Harden having to play great defense, but or put forth that level of effort. We'll see if that's something that would fit. But yeah, like I'm looking at other teams where he might potentially end up. I mean, heaven help us if he ends up with the Chicago Bulls. Is that being kind of like the facilitated third team in a deal or something along those lines?
I'd like that. That'd be the best player the Bulls have had in a while.
It'd be fun, but I mean, I might take Zach LaVine over James Harden.
Really? Oh, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways that it could shake out. It'll be interesting to see how it actually does. But yeah, there's no real easy fit. I don't think moving him to another team, unless I don't even know if like Denver wants to try to get creative or something like that. It really feels like Clippers get him
Denver
back to
does
LA.
not want to mess with what they have there.
Maybe try some way to send him to LA. I know the Lakers always want to get somebody for a box of packing peanuts or something like that. They might try to throw their hats in the ring.
I don't think so.
Yeah, there's no real easy fit, so that's why it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But it does feel like a little bit of a separation would work, and a little bit of a better fit for Philadelphia would work. Even though, I mean, we had high hopes for it when this deal initially reached, it was culminated a couple years back, because we thought that Embiid and Harden together would pair up so nicely. And unfortunately, that has not been the case, much to the detriment of one Doc Rivers and his coaching career as of right now.
Some cases, but yes.
Yeah. The Dallas Mavericks committing to Kyrie Irving with a significant contract, so significant that it kind of makes me wonder, was anybody else offering something that close? But we certainly saw last year that, and not necessarily that because they traded for Kyrie, that they ended up missing the play-in tournament even. But Dallas certainly tumbled down the rankings after, or the standings after making a move to bring in Kyrie. Now they're committing to him. They're going all offense with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Is this the right move for Dallas, or do you feel that they paid up because they felt they had no other options, as they've been struggling to bring other stars to the Lone Star State?
I kind of lean more towards the latter. They had no other option. But with that said, do you have to make the move? I mean, look, let's be honest. There's a lot of talent. Luka and Kyrie are both amazing. Usually, the mid-season move, it takes a little time. I mean, even like LeBron and Wade, the first year it took some time. Like it took some time to adjust. It was year 2 where Wade said, "Look, LeBron, I'm gonna be Robin." The first year it was like Batman A was LeBron, Batman B was Wade, and you didn't really know. I think that, and this is an interesting thing with Durant and Booker. We'll see what happens with those guys year 2. They have a ton of talent. I mean, on the surface of it, though, they should have paid Jalen Brunson, who's a better defender than Kyrie Irving, who's a more clear Robin and a better fit with Luka. But there is ball-dominant players. And then there's Luka Doncic, who's very ball-dominant. Kyrie Irving is pretty ball-dominant. Talk about doing the same thing. I just don't know that these guys fit together. If they can somehow make it work, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
If Kyrie Irving is available and not being a headache, I mean, you can make a case for Kyrie Irving being a top 10 player in the NBA, probably, right? Skill-wise, he should be. He's right there.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't like Kyrie Irving, but he's borderline top 10. Luka is borderline top 5. I mean, we'd have two really, really good players who can do pretty much anything they want offensively. But it's the same player again, same thing as the Suns. It's the same player. And yes, they're both willing to pass, but they're more of like, we're going to pass because we're facilitating and everyone comes to us. It's not
Hmm.
more of that crisp ball movement. It's more of that ISO passer, that pick and roll, that I'm going to pass when I get double and triple teamed. So it's tricky because there's rumors of Luka going to request a trade, that he doesn't like Kyrie. I don't know how much of that is true. But then again, like, could they have won a championship with Luka alone? No, I don't think so. I know they got to the Western Conference that one year, but I think that was a little bit more of the Suns flopping than Dallas getting there. So I think it was just like, you know what? It's a 3-year deal. We'll try the risk and hope it works. That's kind of like what it felt like. They're just throwing a dart out there.
Hmm.
Um, I'm leaning towards it's not going to work, but you never know. That's Dallas is hoping that it does somehow work. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm firmly in the camp of, this is going to keep you competitive and entertaining throughout a season, but this does not make the Dallas Mavericks a championship worthy team. In my estimation, I didn't think that the move at the time or at the trade deadline made them a title contending team. I mean, this they barely, certainly we saw them tumble down the standings, like I said. Even walking into a new season, brand new, clean slate, I don't know if this makes them a top four team in the West. To be perfectly honest with you, it's
They
just like
were before Kyrie, by the way, just to be
they were
clear.
before, yeah. Like there's a lot of really good talent, really good teams out there, but I mean, just immediately I just go Denver, Phoenix, Golden State. So already that's three teams that
LA,
are clearly a
LA.
healthy LA Lakers team. Absolutely. I missed an opportunity to say the Clippers.
No,
That'd have been funny to assume that you would mean the Clippers belong as that
no.
fourth team over the Lakers. But
Ugh,
even Sacramento on the rise a little bit, I would say, is a better team. Like this is a Dallas Mavericks team that's pretty much going to be playing for a play-in spot. And we're looking at a Western Conference where Houston has made some moves to ostensibly get themselves a little bit better,
I could
bringing
see
in Fred
Dallas
Van
getting the
Vliet.
6th seed, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be battling it with the Clippers, with the Timberwolves, with the Pelicans. Like
The
we've got
Grizzlies.
Grizzlies, of course. Yeah, I mean, John Morant's going to be missing a decent chunk of the season. Zion Williamson,
Yeah, but the
ideally,
Grizzlies
is going to be
got rid of Dylan Brooks, so that should make them better because
that
he was
makes them
missing
even
all those
better. So
shots.
So that's where I kind of stand with the Dallas. Is it feels like they made this move because they had to remain somewhat competitive, to almost to retain the asset of Kyrie Irving, because you can't trade him if he's not on your team. So at the very least, they have that as an option as well. If they're looking to either upgrade from Kyrie Irving to a different star, or if Luka makes some sort of trade ultimatum, that they have not one but two pieces that they can send off to really jumpstart a rebuild, kind of how we saw the Utah Jazz do, trading away Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell in the same offseason last year. So from that standpoint, from a flexibility standpoint, I get it, but certainly Dallas is not a title contender in my book. They could, however, depending how things go, be an in-season tournament contender, as that has been finally brought into existence. Adam Silver's kind of been teasing, hinting at, coquettish, oh, will there, won't there be an in-season tournament? Well, we now have it. We are having it. Let's see, I'm pulling up the details here. It
November and
starts in
December.
late December into or late November into early December. The pairings have already been grouped together, five teams, three pairings in each conference, and then of course there's a whole bunch of rules. There's the round robin, who's going to advance out of that into the single elimination knockout. There's a whole bunch of nitty gritty details that you can find online as far as the rules and how everything's advancing. But just as a general concept, Common, how do you feel about the NBA in-season tournament? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Is it much ado about nothing?
It's fantastic. So actually, they're incorporating this as regular season games. That's the other interesting
Yes.
tidbit. It's not a separate entity. It's still 80, what is it, 81, 82
Two.
82 at regular season games. So it's part of those regular season games. So it counts towards your regular season record and the in-season tournament record, which is kind of different than what they do in European soccer. We've got your FA Cup in England, your Copa del Rey in Spain, so on and so forth, your cup competition, where they actually bring in the second and third division teams playing that as well. And that's a separate competition from your in-season tournament. That's where I struggled. Had they done it as a separate competition, I think guys would have lost interest. But this is an in-season competition. You get rewards for winning. You get extra, publicity. And obviously, it's kind of like a March Madness feel to it. A one-game elimination scenario. Now, are they going to all of a sudden say winning an in-season tournament is the same as winning a championship? No, it's not. But it creates that like one-game scenario, kind of like those playing games that are actually really fun. And I know in the past the playing teams hadn't gone far, but I told you the league is much more close in competition. Lakers were a playing team, made the Western Conference Finals. The Heat were a playing team, made the NBA Finals. I love the round robin format. This is an awesome move by the NBA. And the NBA continues to be innovative and ahead of their times. They're always coming up with fresh ideas, new ways to do things. I remember, for example, they were so far ahead, like MLB and NFL should adopt this too. Seeding based on not winning your divisions. It's based on overall record. NBA is the only league that does that, of those three at least. I remember they used to actually have that in the NBA. You would be the division champ, you'd be the 2 or 3 seed when there was 3 other teams with better records. We see that in the NFL all the time. A 9-8 team hosts a playoff game against a 10-7 team, 11-6 team. It's not fair. NBA is always coming up with stuff. The bubble, again, they beat Major League Baseball to that. MLB could have had a bubble in spring training. So this is just another awesome move by Adam Silver. Look, nobody's perfect. No league is perfect. No commissioner is perfect. But in my opinion, the way the league handles issues, the way they come up with ideas, Adam Silver is the best commissioner in the game. And this is going to be a lot of fun for sure. Seeing these guys go head to head in a one-game elimination game with the March Madness feel, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, as far as trying something to bump up the interest in the regular seasons, I think that's something that has been waning both from a fan perspective as well as a player perspective, as far as we're going to rest guys and load management, all these things. I think that trying something new absolutely is something that the NBA had to do, because I think it was Mike Malone was talking about this as they were gearing up for their NBA Finals run for the Denver Nuggets, that basically the regular season is used as a build-out period for your postseason strategy and ultimately your success, where you use the regular season, you're trying to win the games, of course, but you're also using them to experiment with different starting lineups. If you've got a couple of pieces, a couple of guys there that you're not quite sure should be in the starting lineup coming off the bench, just as, if not more importantly, what does your closing 5 look like? How often should we be using, pick and roll? How often should we be using a drop versus trap defense? That's what the regular season has been for, and this kind of led to a bit of just a lack of interest. I'm blanking on the word top of mind, but a lack of interest, a lack of intrigue in what the NBA regular season is, and this is at least a step in trying to fix it. I can tell you that for me, this doesn't make me want to watch NBA games any more or less than I already do. I think that from a culture perspective, for better or for worse, America is always about winning the championship. New England Patriots 16-0 in the regular season. What do we remember them for? Not winning that last game of the season.
73-9 Warriors.
who had the best record in MLB last year?
Uh,
We don't
Dodgers.
necessarily know, but it's the Houston
Dodgers.
Astros that won the World Series. That we remember right off the top of our head. So
Yeah.
as far as American culture goes, I understand this is going to be kind of like a step in the direction of trying to bring a little bit more relevance to your product earlier on in the season, but this is right in NFL playoff push time. I mean, that's where a lot of eyes are going to be. This is right where college football starts to push for their bowl games and their playoff as well. So I understand the NBA trying to take steps, but as I'm reading through all this, I'm just like, this doesn't do anything for
Do they
me.
get
And
extra money for winning? I don't know. These players are motivated by that. I think
like
maybe.
that's going to be an extra motivation as well. But at the same time, I mean, Fred Van Vliet just made $130 million, and he's an all star. He's a pretty good player in the NBA. But even pretty good players in the NBA are cashing massive checks. I don't know how much
True.
the extra few dollars really is worth it to me. I would be more a fan of the NBA actually having a trophy and some ceremony and some pomp and circumstance for the team that does have the best record in the NBA. So getting a little bit closer to
European
like
soccer.
a European treble type of thing.
Ooh.
This is going to take a long time for this to take root. I can just say that for me personally, is how I feel about it. I mean, good on you for trying something new, but it doesn't move the needle as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
So
I'm still watching most of my basketball post March Madness as far as that goes because I know that 82 games I can just kind of keep a cursory eye on things, watch highlights, read box scores, read game recaps, occasionally listen to something on the radio, but for the most part I don't need to be day in day out keeping up with it because ultimately it comes down to like that last stretch of the season.
yeah, and to be clear, Tom, this is how most fans are. This is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily an NBA thing. It's the same thing with baseball, maybe even worse. It's the same thing with hockey. It's just the way we consume sports these days. You have your sports center. You can watch your clips on your phone, on YouTube. You can read stuff quickly. Even like NFL, Red Zone. You don't even have to watch the whole game. It
Mm-hmm.
just the way games are consumed has changed. But even back in the day, I mean, the postseason's the best, period. Everything's on the line. You're never going to top the postseason compared to regular season. Now, I am
Mm-hmm.
someone who does the best they can to watch regular season basketball just because I love the NBA and I love basketball so much. Obviously, I work at nights, a lot of nights. So, I can't do as much as I would like because of work.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had more of a 9 to 5 schedule, which then I would maybe try to watch even more. But I'm a rare breed. I just love basketball. So for me, I can watch regular season basketball and enjoy it. But I think you're right. It's not gonna like all of a sudden trump the NFL. I mean, the NFL is
Mm-hmm.
by far America's sport, and the NFL and college football have that advantage of there's just so few games that every game matters when it comes to seeding, when it comes to playoffs. You just
Mm-hmm.
can't replicate that in any other
Yeah.
sport.
Yeah.
Just undoable.
And another
Um,
quick point on the in-season tournament is I understand that it's not necessarily going to be geared for people like me. It's actually going to be geared more toward fans who are about 10, 15 years younger than we are, or even 20 years younger. It's going
I'm
to be
young at
aimed
heart, Tom.
at
Though
getting it's
I'm a
well,
young
yeah,
boy. I'm
but
still a boy.
it's aimed at getting young fans more invested early because that's also right around the time that lists are going and letters are going to the North Pole for Santa Claus, and this is a good way of trying to boost a little bit of visibility. It's
Okay.
also getting ahead of something that I've
I
heard
didn't
just
think
like,
Santa Claus would be in this discussion today.
well, he's making an appearance. It's
Go
Christmas in
Santa,
July here in
baby.
Chicago. 6 months from now, these raindrops are going to be snowflakes, and I'm looking forward to it. But the other thing is going to be that I've heard kind of rumblings that the NFL would love to get to not just more games in a season, but more teams in more cities, more games during a week, basically building
Money.
out their inventory so that you've got perhaps eventually Tuesday or Wednesday night football or something along those lines. I think this is also the NBA looking ahead and saying, let's get a jump on boosting our viewership this time of year is kind of like a preemptive way of trying to hold on to your market share, your audience share, as the NFL is inevitably going to try to claw into that space as well. So even though I personally am not going to be moved by this in-season tournament, I do think it is a good move for the NBA to do as much as they can to boost their brand awareness, because I think, outside of like the most ardent fans, I'd say probably Christmas is when a lot of people start tuning into the NBA for those Christmas Day matchups. Usually November's kind of going by the wayside as far as that goes. So long way to a short point. Good on the NBA for building up their brand, building up their product, even if I'm not necessarily a huge fan of it.
Yeah. Can't hurt. A couple real quick things to wrap this up,
Yes.
then we'll get into baseball. Victor Wembanyama, NBA Summer League. First game didn't score much. Second game scored a bunch. I really love the excitement. They're shutting him down for summer. But Victor, to me, he screams Giannis vibes. Like, I don't know how refined his offensive game is going to be. I don't know how well he's going to shoot, but it's obvious he's going to rebound well. He's going to play great defense. And with just how big he is, he's going to be a force down low. So excited to have him in the NBA. Real quick, they're doing a few new rule changes. We don't have to get into it, but I think we'll probably agree. Basically, it's anti-flopping measures. So guys who flop can get punished. Again, good on the NBA for making that move. But let's move on to the MLB, our mid-season reports here.
Yeah, so we'll jump off with a bunch of individual player awards as we're going to go through the MVP and Cy Young for National and American League. And spoiler alert, and also a little bit of tooting my own horn, most of these are going to be the same as what I had preseason going into this point. There's only one notable change, and that's where we'll begin. We'll begin with the National League MVP. I believe preseason, going up to the top here, I had Juan Soto for the San Diego Padres.
Not gone well.
Good player, but he's not been MVP level. I mean, for me, I think it's a pretty clear-cut answer with Ronald Acuna, who's got 21 home runs. He's got 40-something stolen bases already. Somebody who is taking advantage of the new pickoff rules, the slightly larger bases on the base paths. He's certainly been an incredibly exciting player, and he's driven in 50-something runs despite hitting leadoff for the Atlanta Braves. So the Braves have been a phenomenal team all this first half of the season. I'll be talking a little bit more about them later. They also have the best player in the National League right now, and I suppose you could make some arguments for other guys having really good seasons, but for me, I think Ronald Acuna is a cut above.
Yeah, Acuna Jr. is my pick as well. He's second in the majors in batting average, second in stolen bases. He's 11th in home runs, but only 5 home runs away from being third. I think he is pretty far and away the guy at the moment. I mean, just looking at the numbers, the other guys that I would throw up there as competition, I would be, for me, the guy that's in second place is his teammate, Matt Olson. He's second. He's got the most home runs and the most RBI in the National League. Matt Olson is definitely a contender. Mookie Betts, he's up there for home runs as well, hitting for power, average. I think Freddie Freeman's my pick in the preseason. He's probably in that like 4 or 5 range. But I think right now, Acuna Jr., his team has the best record. He's doing everything. He's a 5-tool player. He's very exciting. There's really not much you can argue unless you really want to go with the power and RBI. I mean, the only guy that could take it from him would be Matt Olson, but doesn't necessarily have the average, the speed of Acuna Jr. And I mean, if you look at the betting favorites, you look at the lines, pretty clearly Acuna Jr. is going to win it. And he's a very exciting baseball player. I think, the last couple of years he had injury. They won the World Series without him. Then he was good, but he struggled a little bit last year. It's safe to say Ronald Acuna Jr. is back, baby.
Yeah, and leading the National League in OPS plus, which has been, it's just absolutely been phenomenal in that. Moving to the National League Cy Young, another area where this is the first of guys that I'm sticking with. This, you could have a lot of debate around a bunch of guys. You can go Zach Gallen out of Arizona, as they've been a really really pleasant
I
surprise
think he started
out
the
in the
All-Star
NL
game.
West. Yes, he did. But for me, I'm going to stick with Spencer Strider, a guy who is leading Major League Baseball in strikeouts per 9 innings. He has been absolutely fantastic throughout the season. Let's see, I'm not sure if he's top 10 in WAR for pitchers, but he's been phenomenal for the Atlanta Braves. And I'll admit, like, part of me sticking with him is the fact that I did pick him preseason, but the fact that everything is so close. I mean, he's fifth in all of baseball in fielder independent pitching. Zach Allen is second if you want to go a couple percentage points lower and pick him as your midseason Cy Young. There's absolutely, not a ton of argument from me on that front. But for me, I will go with the mustachioed Spencer Strider for the Atlanta Braves.
Now, this is where I completely disagree because for me, when it comes to pitching, the most important stat is ERA,
Wins.
Mr. ERA, and Spencer Strider. Yes, he's getting a lot of strikeouts. Yes, he's got wins. I got it pulled up here on my phone, Tom Casselman. He is 27th in Major League Baseball in earned run average, 3.44. You look at some of the other contenders. My Cy Young is Clayton Kershaw, 2.55 ERA. He's got nearly 1 point better in earned run average than Spencer Strider. So that's my pick. And I think the runner-up for me at the moment is actually got to be Justin Steele of the Cubs. He's got the second best ERA in the National League, just 0.01 behind Kershaw, 2.56. Gallen also, by the way, his ERA above 3. He's got 11 wins. Strider's got 11 wins, but Kershaw has 10 wins. So it's like he's got one less win and a way better earned run average. So it's got to be Clayton Kershaw. And I think of these guys, he's the most likely to keep it up at this level. So I know he's won a bunch of these. He may not get it only because of that reason only. I know they don't love to give the same guy that award a lot, but again, I know he hasn't been quite as great in the postseason, but I kind of like under the radar. Clayton Kershaw is one of the most underappreciated pitchers of all time because he's been. I know we've had Verlander, Scherzer, but like you look at consistency, the last 10 years, no question, the best pitcher in baseball, and he is the best pitcher in baseball at the moment because he's got the best ERA. Actually, technically, I think Framber Valdez is 2.51. McClanahan is 2.53. Kershaw is 2.55. So he's 0.04 away, but he's got the best one in the National League. Rolling with Kershaw. The Dodger team has been good, but they've also just underachieved just a tiny bit, just a pinch. They'll pick it up even more in the second half. He'll get even more wins. Give me Clayton Kershaw for the NL Cy Young.
We gonna have any disagreement on AL MVP? Do you think?
I don't think so.
It's pretty obvious. It's Shohei Ohtani leading major leagues in home runs, leading the American League in OPS plus. He has been absolutely phenomenal this season. So I mean, and let's just say nothing of the fact that he's been pretty good pitching as well. I know he's not to the same level as Cy Young worthy guys, but his ERA is in the mid 3s. He's, for those who care about wins and losses, 7-3 on the season. He's been pretty solid.
ERA, and he's top 5 in strikeouts.
So he's the MVP. I know that he got dinged up a little bit, and typically I think July is the 1 month out of the year where we see a dip in his production. So we'll see if he's able to push through that this season, or if it'll be the typical July dip, and then he'll be back to absolutely mashing come August and September.
Real quick.
Probably not October, though.
Yeah. No, probably not, unless he gets traded at the deadline, which is possible. But what I love about Ohtani, like I do about Acuna, in the modern game, very rarely do we see guys who hit for power and average. It's very rare. Ohtani, 302 batting average, 32 home runs, 71 RBI. And obviously, he's the only guy who pitches and hits. By far, the easy MVP, Ohtani.
And that brings us to pitching again in the American League Cy Young. I think, again, you're going to have a number of different guys that you could go with this one. But for me, I'm sticking with my guy, Framber Valdez. You already mentioned if you want to look at earned run average, he is leading baseball there. If you want to look at pitching wins above replacement, he is second behind Garrett Cole. If you want to look at fielder independent pitching, which is essentially how effective is a pitcher at preventing home runs, walks, hit by pitches, while also getting strikeouts? He is third in all of baseball, only behind Kevin Gossman of the Toronto Blue Jays and Zach Gallen of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Framber Valdez has been absolutely phenomenal for the Houston Astros this year, and a year where they've kind of been starved for a lot of pitching consistency. He's been the one guy that's been going to the post every fifth day and delivering for Houston.
Yeah, this is a two-man race. It's very close. Could go either way. Valdez, 2.51 ERA. Shane McClanahan, 2.53. So we're talking 0.02 difference, which is pretty much nothing. For me, obviously, as you saw with Kershaw, I do place much more importance on earned run average. But when it's virtually tied, I'm going to go with Shane McClanahan. He's 11-1, tied for the most wins in the majors. He's got the second best ERA in the majors. Valdez is only 7-6. A lot of that has been bullpen problems, some bad luck. Again, it's neck and neck. But if I have to absolutely pick, I would take McClanahan just a smidge better. I mean, 10 games over 500. Valdez just one over. But no one else is really close. Like you look at the ERA in the American League, Nathan Eovaldi, 2.83. Dane Dunning, 2.84. Garrett Cole, 2.85. So these two guys are about 0.3 points ahead of everyone else. At the moment, it's a two-man race. I say 1 and 1A. I'll disagree with you. I'll go with McClanahan as 1, and then we'll go Valdez 1A for me for the AL Cy Young.
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking about guys, and a lot of them, again, we had preseason penciled in as guys who are going to be in contention for these awards. But we also picked division winners. We picked World Series preseason, and certainly some changes there as
No doubt.
teams like the St. Louis Cardinals, the Chicago White Sox, who now had both. We both had them winning the Central. Both of them have sorely disappointed in that regard. But are they the most disappointing teams? And we'll go regardless of fandom, because I'm always disappointed in the Chicago White Sox these days. But I've actually got somebody else that I'm more disappointed in than even them. Who you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the White Sox is the same old story with the injuries. I don't really think they're in the discussion. They're probably like the fourth most disappointing. The Cardinals, maybe the third most. But again, they don't have that same roster they used to have. I think it's really down to two teams. One in particular, by far the most disappointing for me is the New York Mets. And a lot of it has been underachieving. 42-48 for the Mets. Pete Alonso is hitting 211. Francisco Lindor is hitting 239. Both are more than 30 points lower than the career averages. So we're talking about all-star level players who are hitting so far below what they normally do. Those guys need to step up. I know Alonso still made the all-star team. I don't know if he should have, but I guess he gets a lot of home runs. But his production is well lower than it normally is. Lindor is well lower than normal. Even their pitchers, I get these guys a little bit older, but Max Scherzer right now, Mizzou Max, 4.31 ERA, way worse than normal. I mean, there's years that his ERA is half that, even within the last few seasons.
Yeah.
Justin Verlander, 3.60, way worse than usual. I know there's been some injuries, but they have the superstar power to be a great team. They have the talent to be a World Series contender. To be 42-48 is vastly disappointing. I have them as the most disappointing team, but a close second has to be the Padres. I mean, the Padres, 43-47, below 500. Tatis Jr. is back. Manny Machado's there. Juan Soto's there. That's like Xander Bogaerts. I mean, they should have 4 MVP candidates in that lineup, and they're under 500. The Mets and the Padres, both just massive disappointments this year. I mean, Yankees a little underachieving, but they've had a ton of injuries playing that great division. That's another team that's been disappointing, but definitely Mets and Padres a cut above the rest when it comes to disappointment.
Yeah, I've got the Padres as my most disappointing team, and no surprise given that I had them pegged as the World Series champion this year, and they currently six games back of the last wild card spot available. I mean, there's certainly still plenty of time in the season. You've got 70 games to go, but just looking at those standings, uh, you're 6 games back of the last spot, and the teams that you have to jump, Milwaukee and Philadelphia, are both half of a game out of that last wild card spot, with the Giants, of course, holding it. So you have to jump 3 teams just to even get into the postseason conversation, while making sure you fight off the Cubs, the Mets, who are hanging right around uh, where you're sitting right now as well. So for me, it's the Padres, and I don't even really know like what the issue is. I mean, it might just be like their superstars aren't performing like superstars, like really, really superstars. Because you look at like wins above replacement. I mean, Tatis and Juan Soto are at 3.9 and 3.4 WAR, so they're definitely being solid impacts on the season. And WAR is a cumulative stat, so that number's only going to go up if they keep playing at their current level. Um, it's just like what's going on with their team? Is it the fact that their pitching isn't really all that great? I mean, they have some solid guys, but for whatever reason, they just have not been able to put it together and be an amazing team. I mean, you look at their pitch. I don't understand their pitching. You got Blake Snell, Michael Wacha, both with sub 3 ERAs. Nobody's really kind of got this ballooned, awful earned run average for their starting rotations. So it's confusing as all get out why they have
Well,
not been able
I
to
think
close out these
they're
games.
losing close games. You look at their run
Hmm.
differential plus 39. So I
Yeah,
mean, they're blowing teams out, but they can't win the close games. Tom, I think that's got to be part of it.
yeah. That tells me like for the optimist that wants to see them make the postseason, that tells me okay, there's some regression to the mean here. Been a while since I've been able to
The
break that phrase
Casselman
out.
regression to the mean line. We know Salute
That's
Your Sports is back, baby. Regression to the
absolutely.
mean.
So there's basically what I'm saying is that everything that San Diego needs to do is internal. I don't think they need to go and make any major moves. If you want to maybe pick up some bullpen reinforcements or something like that, but by and large, the pieces are all here and the pieces are all performing fairly well. They are just not really closing things out right now. I mean, it's bonkers. I mean, Josh Hader, your closer, is 21 saves and a 1.08 ERA. So this tells me it's those middle innings. It's that sixth, seventh, eighth inning. Bridging it to your closer, where they're probably coming up a little bit short, but certainly some room for improvement there on the most disappointing. But let's go for some positive
Yeah.
vibes here. Who has been the most surprising team to you this year? I think there's certainly a couple of candidates from which to choose.
Yeah, there's two. I'll give you one for the National League, one for the American League. I'm going to go with the one that I think is the most surprising in a good way. And this is definitely the Cincinnati Reds. They were
Hmm.
62 and 100 last year, 38 games under 500. They are 9 over at the moment. I know they technically played a little bit more than half the season, but they're almost at their win total they had last year as we speak. I mean, Ellie De La Cruz, uh, stealing second, stealing third, stealing home. Had he started at the start of the season, he'd be in the All Star game. They're just such a fun squad. They are taking advantage of a really bad division. I know that's
Hmm.
true, but it is just a very fun squad. I don't think anyone would have had the Reds as the NO Central champs, which I think they're going to be the champs. And part of that is not so much, I
Hmm.
mean, it is how good they are, how fun they are. But I think it's a bad division. But Joey Votto's back, and he said that this team is just super exciting. He's loving playing with the squad. The Reds are, for me, definitely the most surprising team in a good way. The second most surprising team is probably the Baltimore Orioles. They were just over 500 last year, 83 games, 83 wins, 83 and 79. They had a lot of young stars like Adley Rutschman, Anthony Santander. And the Orioles are 100% legit. But for them to be 54 and 35 in the best division in baseball, where every team is over 500, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Rays, all these teams are great. So I think Baltimore, like them making the playoffs is not, I mean, I didn't have them in the playoffs, and I'm assuming they're
Mhm.
going to make the playoffs if they hold on. That's not necessarily surprising, but to be 19 over, the third best record in the majors, the Baltimore Orioles kind of felt like they're what, 2, 3 years away with their young talent. Right
Sure.
away this year, Baltimore has been phenomenal in 2023.
Yeah, I think in the National League, a really positive surprise has actually been the Arizona Diamondbacks in the
That's another
division where
good
you
one.
could say
Yeah.
the LA Dodgers, the San Diego Padres, even a little bit the San Francisco Giants is kind of the top three. We quickly and easily dismissed, of course, the Colorado Rockies, justified as a non-starter. But same thing with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and currently sitting second in that division, firmly in the wild card race right now. And actually, I say they're second in the division. They're two hundredths of a percentage point behind the
They've
LA
been
Dodgers.
first
They're a
most of
virtual
the
tie.
year. They've
Yeah,
been
they're a
first
virtual
most of the
tie
year.
with the Dodgers right now. So they've been a really good surprise. But for me, my most pleasant surprise is actually in the AL West with the Texas Rangers. We're talking about a team that lost 94 games last season
They had
and
a
now
great
have
offseason, though. But
had a
I
great
agree.
offseason. I mean, they spent a lot of money, but Jacob DeGrom, again, injured.
Goes
We thought he
down.
was going to be a big part of this team. Second best run differential in baseball, sandwiched right in between the Tampa Bay Rays at plus 149. You've got the Rangers at plus 148. You've got the Atlanta Braves at plus 147. The next best run differential is the LA Dodgers at plus 76. That's half as many runs as these other teams have been putting up, which to me is not just shocking that they are leading the division, and it's only by a couple of games, testament to the Houston Astros for staying in it as well. But it's the fact that they are doing it by such a wide margin on a game by game basis. Certainly, their investment in starting pitching has worked, and I know everybody points to, oh, this is the San Diego Padres and how they spent all of this money and they're currently in fourth place. Well, the Texas Rangers, like you said, went out and not just one, but two off seasons have invested heavily, getting Corey Seager, Marcus Simeon last year, Jacob DeGrom, Nate Eovaldi this year.
Evaldi's been
They're,
really good, too.
they are certainly right there as far as being a legit team. Because their pitching has now caught up to their hitting, which is something that we don't often say about the Texas Rangers, even going back to some of their other competitive teams. It's always been about the bats and being able to mash and getting by with pitching. Pitching is just as much a weapon as the offense is. So, it for me, tying into the next topic of conversation is our midseason picks to make and to win the World Series. I'm going to continue with a surprising team on this one. I'm going to continue with the Texas Rangers to come out of the American League, win that pennant, make the World Series. I mean, it's not going to be easy because the Houston Astros are still really good. The Tampa Bay Rays, they're a lowercase surprising to me because I mean I had them pegged as a wild card team. I had the Rays pegged as a playoff team for certain, but I did not have them, starting out the season 20 something, like however many wins in a row they had at that one point early on in the season, and having this run differential in this really, really tough division. So lowercase s surprised on the Tampa Bay Rays. I think they're probably the number one contender because they too have a great balance of pitching and offense and defense. But for me, I'm going to go with the Texas Rangers to make the World Series, but I'm going to have somebody else as my winner. Kamen, who do you have?
Yeah, so real quick, the reason why I didn't pick the D-backs is because they barbecued one of my bets. No betting locks this week, Tom. $20 parlay, $270. I hit all the legs, I think 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6, whatever. Diamondbacks up 1-0 in the ninth inning, 2 outs against the Mets. Home run. Mets score 2 runs in the ninth, lose it for me 2-1. Boo, Arizona. Boo, Arizona. But yeah, those are good picks. I think we hit on all those teams. My picks, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you both.
Sure.
Make the World Series, win the World Series. I think in the National League, the Braves and the Dodgers are the two best teams. I think the Braves right now might be slightly better, but very rarely does the team with the best record win the World Series. I believe the 2016 Cubs were the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Dodgers have been the best team in baseball now the last 10 years. I mean, Astros right there as well. They've only had, one World Series to show for it. I will say the Dodgers are due. Kershaw is going to also deliver in the postseason. Betts and Freeman. Dodgers make and win the World Series. The team that faces them is the Rays. They've been the other really, really good team the last few years. I mean, they have a great team. Wander Franco, Randy Arozarena, great guys at the plate. McClellan on the mound. They just find ways to win. They've also had, I think only one World Series to show for all of their regular season success the last few years. So I've got Dodgers and Rays, and I've got the Dodgers winning. But let's be 100% clear about this. When it comes to baseball, you might as well draw straws, because regular season success, the best team on paper, it's not basketball, it's not football. Quite frankly, it probably doesn't matter. But for the sake of making a pick, give me the Dodgers to win it all.
Yeah, I'll go just opposite of you on that one. I'm going to go with the Atlanta Braves. They've got the best player in the National League in Ronald Acuna Jr., the best player in the American League, unfortunately, not likely to be making the postseason and having any sort of impact, which is an absolute shame on that front. But similar to the Rangers, where you have good offense balanced with good pitching, I mean, the Braves have really, really good pitching as well. I know Spencer Strider's ERA is a bit higher, but if you look at things like fielder independent pitching, that to me says that the ERA is a bit higher than it ought to be. Basically because on things that Spencer Strider himself can control, not accounting for defense, et cetera, that has been absolutely phenomenal at limiting base runners and at getting strikeouts. So I think that the Braves have that. I mean, Bryce Elder is somebody that we haven't mentioned. He's pitching even better, it seems, than Spencer Strider at times. Although, again, flip the fielder independent pitching and the ERA a little bit, there could be some regression there. But I think they've got a balance. Good bullpen for the most part, and that run differential is really difficult to ignore. That not just says that this is a good team, but this is a significantly better team. Not like the Padres, who I just looked it up, and they have a 5-19 record in one run in extra inning games, which is atrocious.
Not good.
But I'm going to go with the Atlanta Braves over the Texas Rangers in a World Series matchup that I don't think anybody had predicted at the beginning of the season, but certainly it'll be interesting to see how the second half goes. Of course, we have the trade deadline August 1st this year.
And if Ohtani goes to the Dodgers, there's my pick right there.
Ohtani could go to Ohtani could go any number of places. I mean, the way that the Angels have been trying to make moves, it kind of feels like they're trying to push for that wild card spot. Let me just pull this up again really quickly as we are on Shohei watch.
But the Trout injury is really hurting them. The Trout getting hurt is going to hurt them, so we'll see.
Yeah, with that hamate bone. Okay, yeah, they're currently sitting 5 games out without Trout. There's a possibility Ohtani could be traded at some point. It'll be interesting to see. Everybody should be lining up and following the Angels to see, hey, what's the price here? What's it going to take to get this guy? And I mean, honestly, you're going to have to almost have permission to negotiate a contract extension or something like with him ahead of time, because the amount of investment that you're going to have to make to get Shohei Ohtani, because you're adding not just a bat, not just a DH, you're adding a guy who can play the outfield as well as pitch. That'll be certainly intriguing. So we have a ton of baseball to go. Like I said, 70 games or so left in the season for a lot of teams, and trade deadline, like I said, sellers, buyers, there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about later on in the summer. So, Kamen, really quickly, we will go through a sports recap with some of the things that you want to highlight, and then I'm going to give a quick salute to round out of the show.
All right, sounds good. So real quick on Ohtani, I saw a random polling, as you know, is not very accurate sometimes, but apparently, according to one article I saw online, not even one of the top 20 most popular athletes among American baseball fans. So the MLB, they are not enjoying Ohtani. MLB fans in America are not huge Ohtani fans. That's what this poll says. Take it for what it's worth. I don't know who did the polling, but that was a very, very odd thing I came across yesterday. Just randomly saw it on the internet.
Yeah.
As for my sports update, I was hoping to wave this Bulgarian flag longer than I have been waving it, but unfortunately, Grigor Dimitrov crushed my heart in the Wimbledon quarterfinals. I've been watching Wimbledon nonstop all week. Cannot get enough of the action. Tennis has just been incredible. Some awesome storylines out of Wimbledon. Svitolina out of Ukraine. Obviously, the war with Russia, everything that's going on. She is now in the Wimbledon semifinals. Really an awesome run for her, Cinderella run. Would love to see her win Wimbledon. Christopher Eubanks dropped a heartbreaking loss today. An American that was ranked outside the top 100 last year, making to the Wimbledon quarterfinals was fantastic. Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz, both in the semis. They are on track for the Wimbledon championship as Novak is, get this, Tom, one major away from tying Margaret Court. Most majors in singles among men or women. He will undoubtedly get it. Just like the French Open, Alcaraz is phenomenal. The moment's going to be too big for Djokovic. 8.5 hours of sleep, baby. Novak does that. That's the key, Tom. You want to be successful, get more sleep. It's very important, sir. Wimbledon's been an absolute joy to watch. And then, of course, it wouldn't be Kamen Entchev without some soccer news for you. USA men's soccer is in the Gold Cup semifinals tonight. It's setting up for a USA-Mexico final in the Gold Cup. Hopefully, America takes them down, just like did in the UEFA Nations League. A little bit weaker Mexico squad at the moment. USA doesn't have their A team necessarily in this tournament, but they should win. And of course, the Women's World Cup starting next week. America going for their third straight World Cup title. Megan Rapinoe, Tom, is announcing her retirement from soccer after the World Cup, after the NWSL season, thinking she goes out on top. Alex Morgan should be incredible in this tournament. Look for her to score a bunch of goals. Go America, take home the third straight World Cup title. And of course, the biggest sports news for me personally, the GOAT, Lionel Messi, he'll be presented as an Inter Miami player for the MLS on Sunday. He'll be making his debut next week. Having the best athlete of all time in America is going to help soccer. It's super exciting. They also added a bunch of other, players, not a bunch, but Busquets, a former Barcelona guy, Jordi Alba on the way, more guys rumored. So tune into some Inter Miami soccer matches. I would never have imagined saying that, which, by the way, I believe they are 29th out of 30 teams in the MLS right now. They're at the bottom. From the bottom to the top we go, baby. Let's go Inter Miami. So summer of soccer, summer of tennis, those are things I'm keeping my eyes out on. Tom, what do you got for your statement of the week?
Yeah, so actually, even before I get to the statement, really quickly, if you're a fan of kind of like baseball trivia stuff, there's this wonderful thing called Immaculate Grid. Every day, you've got 9 squares, kind of Punnett score style. Check it out if you want to get into some interesting baseball stuff. It's really, really fun to do every single day. Much, much better than Wordle.
Can you text it to me?
Yeah, I'll text it to you. Immaculate Grid. It's a ton of fun. But for my my statement, my salute, it's a little bit two-parter. News out of Northwestern, up in Evanston, not too far from Chicago. Pat Fitzgerald, the head football coach, has been ousted after extensive reporting about a long-standing hazing program at Northwestern. We're also starting to find out details about some racism happening in that program. And this is all due to the salute I'm about to give is to the student journalists
at
the Medill School of Journalism on Northwestern's campus. The reason we're learning about all of this stuff is the extensive and in-depth reporting that organization has been doing, that those students have been doing, and I'm assuming faculty lending assistance as needed. But we're learning about all the stuff from them, not from national outlets or citywide outlets. The scoop is almost exclusively going is coming from Northwestern, not Chicago Sun Times or Tribune or New York Times or Washington Post or anything. This is the boots on the ground, and it takes, in my estimation, no small amount of courage for these students to speak truth to power. And that's especially true because they are students on a college campus where football typically has an outsized level of importance in the political landscape of a college community. And these students are essentially reporting on their peers, their fellow classmates, even if they're not in the same classroom. It's guys that are on campus, guys that have been on campus, and of course the head football coach Pat Fitzgerald, who has been synonymous with Northwestern. I mean, if I were to say, hey, name something about Northwestern football, it would be Pat Fitzgerald. And the fact that he's been, an alum, was defensive coordinator, stepped in as the head coach when I'm blanking on the name, but the former head coach had passed away. Pat Fitzgerald was tagged as the guy in waiting. So there's a ton of peer pressure, I'm sure, as well as you've got folks who are on campus who these guys have to sit and walk around campus with a lot of the guys that they're reporting on and having an impact on. So just a tremendous amount of respect and kudos to those students for doing the reporting that they're doing, specifically the Daily Northwestern, which is the student paper, Inside NU, which is SB Nation's outlet for covering Northwestern, and again is staffed mostly by, or at least in part by students at Northwestern, and to be also doing it over summer break specifically. I mean, class isn't even in session outside of some summer courses, so the fact that they are working these sources and getting this information, it's absolutely phenomenal, and it's great to see it. It's a ray of sunshine for news organizations going forward, because this is a big sports story, a big news story, and we're seeing in a lot of places that departments are cutting their sports coverage and they're cutting their news coverage, and you're paring down your staff rooms. This is why it's important, because something that we didn't think was going to happen in Northwestern. We always think about Larry Nasser at Michigan State, Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. I mean, we always think about Northwestern being this level of, the Harvard of the Midwest, this higher level of institution and education, where this sort of, banal, juvenile, horrendous behavior doesn't take place. And the fact that it does is shocking. And it's all because of these students finding it out and breaking this news. So kind of went a little all over the place with that one, but I did want to shout out those students. There's many of them working on different reports, so I don't have all of the names, but definitely read their bylines, because I think we're going to be hearing from these kids, these young adults, as they move on in their professional careers, to be certain.
Yeah, journalism never sleeps. As a former TV sports journalist turned podcaster, I know that. So 100% agree with that. Great show. I know it was a long one. I know we started late, but always a pleasure, Tom. I know it might be about a month since our next show, but we'll be talking a lot of football. For all the things we did talk about, no football today. We'll be talking college football, NFL football in about a month or so. Looking forward to that. As always, Tom, such a pleasure. Cosmo Kramer over there, Tom Casselman. You guys have a sort of resemblance. I like it. Look at Tom looking good. That's going to do it for us this show. We'll see you soon, Tom. Be sure to text me that trivia thing. I'm a trivia.
Oh, it's already there.
Already there. Perfect.
Already there. Have fun.
I'll be checking it out. Thank you to all the listeners, viewers. I know this is typically a weekly show, a little bit of a summer break, but look for more shows as we get into the football season, and we'll see you guys soon. Tom, I'll see you soon, and have a good one.